are, honey. Oh my goodness. Perfect. So today I'm going to be talking about how to create prices for your photography, specifically for weddings. Now, I think there's a big misunderstanding in terms of how to do this. I've heard a lot of advice like, you have to charge what you're worth. I remember being in school, and like, not to like bash anyone, because I don't think this person was an expert in this particular question or answer, so she was just winging it. But a student asked, what should I be charging for like a session or a wedding or something? And she said to charge what you're worth. Now, that is a problem to me, because that means that we're basing a number off of our self-esteem, and that's gonna go one of two ways. You can either overprice, underprice, or maybe you'll be right on point, but I highly doubt it. The other thing I see people doing is charging what someone else charges, or charging less than what their competitor charges. Makes absolutely zero sense to me. What people are forming their prices by is their lifestyle and needs and themselves. So why would you want to charge your price based off of them? It just makes no sense to me. So with that being said, I'm going to walk you through how I create prices for my wedding photography. It's just a formula. It takes some time and some effort and some digging, but it's really not that hard. So let's jump into it. I always forget to say this at the beginning, but don't forget to grab a little coffee, a blanket, get cozy, grab your laptop so you can take some notes. Oh, I would also like to note that I think at the beginning of this video I made it sound like never went through the phase of just guessing a price. I totally did that. At one point I think I was charging like $375 for a wedding. $375, and that's not a problem if that's what you want to charge, but like, how did I come up with that number? If you're doing it for a friend or a family, or if you're not a photographer, you're just doing it as like a gift to someone, but they want to pay you something, you don't know what to charge, just create a price that you want. It doesn't really matter. But if you want to get serious about it, and like this is going to be like a career for you, you need to create a price list that makes sense. So here's how you do it. So the first thing that you need to consider when making your price list is what you're spending to shoot a wedding, which I know you're probably thinking, how would I possibly know that? I haven't shot it yet. Well, there are a few different expenses that you will want to consider for this. Let's call it a formula that we're creating. So on one hand, there's your annual big expenses, I'll call it, and that's stuff like your camera, your lenses, any gear that you own, your computer, any software, so your editing software, your booking software, anything that you would use or have bought before shooting the wedding, whatever you bought that you would need to book a wedding even. So that could be like your marketing material. You need to go through and add all of those expenses up. I would start by making a list. So camera, lens, computer, this, that, whatever you have, make a list of all those things, what they costed you. You can do this in like a Google sheet. Once you have all of those expenses, we're gonna, like I called them, the big annual expenses, you're gonna wanna sum them all up and get a total number. Now, one thing I want to note is that these big expenses, I'm considering them annual, but technically there's things that you aren't going to be buying every single year. For example, like your camera, your computer. What I would do is take the number, the price of your camera, and let's say you buy a new camera every other year, just for an example. You're going to divide that in two, and then let's say you're going to buy a computer every 2 years, you're going to divide that number in 3, because you're paying the equipment off as you need it. I hope that makes sense. So once you have those numbers, add them up. And then there are other things that you will be paying for every single year. Like Creative Cloud, like your editing software, Photoshop, Lightroom, you have to pay for those every year. So you would just keep that number whole. Don't divide it by anything. Now, just for fun, I'm just going to say this number is $10,000, okay? So that's what it's costing you before you even shoot a wedding. I know, it's insane. And you're gonna wanna divide that number by the amount of weddings that you're going to plan on shooting. Now that really ranges for everybody. I know some people like to shoot 10 weddings a year. I know other people like to shoot 40 weddings a year. It's really up to you. Use the number you think you can realistically shoot. Don't use your goal number, because if it's a goal, that means that you probably haven't achieved it yet. Don't use that number. Probably go by what you have booked in the last year, if you've booked weddings. If not, just use the number of weddings you think you can book. So for this example, we're just gonna go right in the middle. Let's say 25 weddings. The other thing to consider is that if you're like me, you're shooting more than just weddings. So I shoot all types of other sessions throughout the year. I shoot couples and engagements, obviously, families, newborns, maternity, branding, boudoir, the list goes on, right? And I'm sure that you probably shoot other things too. So if you don't, ignore this next part, but if you do, I would consider how much you shoot sessions versus weddings. So instead of dividing your $10,000 by 25 weddings, you might want to split that $10,000 even in half. If you think you're shooting half weddings, half sessions, you would split that $10,000 in half, so $5,000 towards weddings and $5,000 towards sessions. That means that you have to create a price list the same way we're doing it now for your sessions, but I'll do that in another video. So for this example, again, we're going to keep the numbers even. We're going to say you're shooting your sessions 50% of the time and weddings 50%. So you're using that equipment and all that software 50% for weddings and 50% for sessions. So weddings are costing you at least $5,000, and then you're going to divide that by the 20 weddings that you're shooting, or however many you think you can shoot. In this case, that's $200. So with each wedding, you're going to charge them a base amount of $200 to cover your big annual expenses. Now, the next set of expenses I want to explain to you, I don't know what to call them. I don't think there's an actual name, so we're just going to call them minor expenses, because big expenses, minor expenses. So these minor expenses are things that you will need at the wedding or after. So that could be a second shooter, an assistant, disposable batteries for your flash, meals to feed you and your team. If you include prints, the price of prints. If you include wedding albums, the price of a wedding album. If you give your client a gift, the price of the gift. Anything that you put into your packages, or you would like to put into your packages, you would include in this minor expense. And I feel like a question I might get is, well, how do I know what to put into a package? That's totally up to you. In my own packages, I like to keep them as simple and like as basic as possible, because I just know that not everybody wants a wedding album and not everybody wants an engagement session included. So I just do like my hourly rate, a second shooter. I don't do anything extra. So that's something to consider, because then people can just add on as they want it. You're gonna end up having to charge more in your wedding package to include an engagement session. So if you want to do that, that's okay, but if not, just leave it basic. I would make another row on Google Sheets or whatever you want to use, whatever you're using, and call these your minor wedding expenses. Now, I understand that these expenses are going to cost you a different amount for a different time period. Like if you're doing like 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, it's going to be a different amount. I would just write your base price, what you pay your second shooter, what you pay your assistant, what batteries will cost you per hour or per wedding, gas, etc. I need a sip of this. So the next thing I want you to do, if you've already shot a wedding, what I would like you to consider is the average amount of hours that you spend at a wedding. So my average amount of hours that I think that I can finish an entire wedding in is 8. I just find that that works best for me. You can just put in however many hours you want. I'm going to create another column or row or whatever it's called on Google Sheets and put 8 hours. And then I'm going to go down the line, add my big annual business expense, and then I'm going to calculate my minor expenses for 8 hours. Now, if you want to offer more than one package, which I do, I also offer a 10-hour package. You can create another column for however many hours that you'd like to include. So for this example, we're going to include 10. You're going to, again, calculate your big annual expense with your minor expenses for 10 hours. So now that you have all of that added up, you can see what a wedding is actually costing you. So at this point, you're not even making any money, honey. This is coming out of your pocket if you aren't charging for this. And that's a big problem. Now, the next part is the most fun because you're going to figure out what you, as the artist or photographer or person or whatever you want to call yourself, should be charging, what you're taking home. Now this, I think, is the hardest part for people because they're like, I don't know what I should be charging, but it's really not that bad. So if you want to get really specific with it, you can add up your personal expenses, like what it costs you to actually live. Create a little spreadsheet of what you have to pay in expenses every month, and then what you want to have fun with, what you want to save for. So let's say you want to take home 100K at the end of the year, okay? So if you were just dividing it by 25 weddings, that would be $4,000 that you're adding to every single package. Now, if you're shooting sessions 2 and you're splitting that in half, you're gonna want to bring home 50K from each wedding, or not from each wedding, from all of your weddings. So 50K divided by 25 is 2,000. So you're gonna add $2,000 to your base package. So that's what you're taking home from that wedding. Now you're gonna need to figure out what your hourly rate is. So if we're starting with the 8-hour package, divide 2,000 or whatever you're charging to that base wedding package divided by the amount of hours that you're shooting. So we're doing 8 here, so it would be $250 an hour. So now that you have your hourly rate, you can add that to your 10-hour package or the next package. You would be charging an additional $500 for your 10-hour package because $250 times 2 is $500, and it's an extra 2 hours. I forgot to say the most important point in the video. You're going to want to add up all your big expenses and your minor expenses with your hourly rate, and then you'll get your total price for your packages. Now, if someone books your 10-hour package, that's just extra money in the bank. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that one thing I didn't mention, and something that I would definitely be interested in doing a video on because I think it's important and not a lot of people realize, is taxes. You're gonna have to pay tax out of what you make. So if you make 100K in a year, you're not going home with 100K, which is fine. That's totally fine because if you're in Canada, free healthcare. But yeah, I think I covered everything that I wanted to. I know that when you first create your pricing, it can be really overwhelming because a lot of people don't realize what they should be charging, and it can feel like, I don't want to charge that much. I get that because to you it's something you enjoy. I understand. I remember thinking, this is something I have fun doing. Like, I don't want to charge people this much to have fun. It seems like wrong, but that's just a mindset thing and an insecurity thing, unfortunately. So I think if you do your own little research on how to get past that, it will really benefit you. And if you don't think your work is good enough to be charging that amount, then that's just all the more reason to keep working on it and keep developing your craft. Oh, and if you get to the end of this formula and think, not comfortable, not charging that, you can always go back and like change how much you want to make in a year. Like, charge what you charge, do what you love. I hope that this made sense. I'm definitely not a math person, so trying to word this and explain to you like what I see on a computer screen is difficult for me, but I really hope it made sense. And if you have any questions at all, please just let me know. Write them in the comments, because I know that a lot of people, if you have a question, they have the same question, and sometimes people are just too afraid to ask. So ask away, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Kingy slept right through it. I hope you didn't. And yeah, thanks guys.